What's that TikTok trend? I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister. Of course I'm going to preach about Elmo this Sunday. It was January 29th, just a regular day on Twitter. I'm just going to keep calling it that. When Elmo innocently asked the internet, "Elmo is just checking in. How is everybody doing?" As of today, Elmo's softball question, "How is everybody doing?" has nearly 20,000 responses. And they confirm what I have already been suspecting. Friends, we are not okay. The responses to Elmo's question ranged from the depressed to the anxious, to people filled with dread about 2024, to those who had recently been laid off, who were grieving loved ones, or who were struggling to make ends meet. On Tuesday, that's just one day after Elmo's status check had received more than 9,000 responses, the account posted a follow-up delivered in the character's signature third-person style. "Wow, Elmo is glad he asked," it read. "Elmo learned it is important to ask a friend how they are doing." Gave it my best shot. Yes, I was texting Don, "How's your Elmo?" yesterday. On a scale of 1 to 10. Anyway, okay. As we emerge now from deep winter, and as we continue to gather through this era of emergence from pandemic, when people continue to be sick and need to isolate, when we connect but only in fits and starts, I have found great hope in the work and efforts of our nation's top doctor. Now, growing up, I always thought of the Surgeon General as the chief finger wagger, trying to block our fun. But this Surgeon General, the one that we are so lucky to have, Dr. Vivek Murthy, well, he is very pro-fun. In fact, he prescribes fun as medicine. In 2023, his office released the U.S. Surgeon General's Advisory on the Healing Effects of Social Connection and Community in a wide-ranging report titled "The Loneliness Epidemic." Loneliness. By definition, when the connections you desire are far greater than the connections you really have. In a recent sweeping study on Americans and loneliness, the Surgeon General's office found that 50% of Americans say they struggle with loneliness ongoing. To be clear, this is not about a passing feeling of loneliness, nor an objective description of how many people are physically in your presence. Because many of the responders were young people on college campuses who were surrounded by a lot of people who reported feeling very deeply lonely. Now, you may be amidst people, but if you cannot share your true self with them, then you will not feel connected and can therefore still feel entirely lonely. Dr. Murthy places loneliness and its medicine, connection, into 3 primary categories, or 3 buckets. There's intimate loneliness, so without a family or close friend, roommate, or spouse. Then there's relational loneliness. That describes the kind of good friendships of someone who will meet you for dinner, or watch a sports game together, or go to a birthday party together. And then there's collective loneliness. That's loss of that sense of community, the community you can find when you regularly volunteer with a group or organization, or community you can have with coworkers, or, of course, religious community you gain from being a part of a church or temple or congregation. Now, knowing that you need all 3 explains how some people can be in a great relationship or marriage, but still feel lonely if they don't have a good circle of friends, or they are not part of a larger community to which they belong. This is important because if your partner is struggling with loneliness, we usually assume it is our fault and our job to fix it. But according to this research, that is not necessarily the case. Murthy, who has been the Surgeon General since being appointed in 2013 by President Obama, links loneliness to health indicators in morbidity and mortality. It turns out the long-time effects of loneliness affect mortality just as much as a smoking habit of a pack of cigarettes a day. Which got me thinking about the Surgeon General's warning on packs of cigarettes, first instituted by Luther Terry, Surgeon General under the Kennedy and Johnson administrations. And I wonder if today's Surgeon General should place a similar loneliness warning on every social media device. Like when you receive your iPhone, it will arrive with a warning. Quitting this device now greatly reduces serious risks to your health. Now, it's complicated because in moderation and with certain usage, the phone is an instrument of connection. But we abuse our phones every day in order to disassociate or disconnect from our surroundings, either to stave off boredom or discomfort or to get that little dopamine rush that comes when someone likes one of your posts. Now, while our use of these devices has steadily increased in recent years, meanwhile, in-person participation in clubs, organizations, and volunteering, those civic centers that brought us physically closer together, well, that has steadily decreased over the last 5 decades, as is well documented in Robert Putnam's great book, Bowling Alone. We all feel lonely from time to time. It's like hunger or thirst. It's a signal our body sends when we lack something necessary for survival. But the loneliness that concerns Dr. Murthy is the type that persists over a long time. In her great book, The Lonely City, Adventures in the Art of Loneliness, writer Olivia Lang writes, so much of the pain of loneliness is to do with concealment, with feeling compelled to hide vulnerability, to tuck ugliness away, to cover up scars as if they are literally repulsive. But why hide? What is so shameful about wanting, about desire, about having failed to achieve satisfaction, about experiencing unhappiness? Why this constant need to constantly inhabit peak states or to be comfortably sealed inside a unit of 2, turned inward from the world at large, she writes. So this is something we do that I have noticed when we are struggling the most, and I mean we in this congregation are struggling the most, well, that is often when we stay shut in. She's not doing well. She's laying low. That's why we haven't seen her. He's lost his job. He's not really up for visitors. But friends, the times when we are struggling are the times when we need to call each other in to help us. We are all ready to be of service, but it is far more vulnerable to request help from someone else. And more than that, to admit loneliness is to fear not being seen as likable or even lovable. But the good news of this language of epidemic is that loneliness is so incredibly common, there really is no need for shame. And I know, this is easier preached than done. We all have our own struggles with loneliness, with feeling apart and isolated. Dr. Murthy himself talks about struggling with loneliness a few years after being appointed Surgeon General. He looked around and realized he had become estranged from many of his friends and even his family due to the workload. And I, too, will admit that I kicked off 2024 in the boxing ring, going a round or two with loneliness, that formidable opponent I have come to meet in battle from time to time. It's like digging in the dirt, this back-breaking, effortful work of facing one's loneliness. For me, it starts off with a serious bout of FOMO, fear of missing out, which I laugh about, but is actually something I struggle with. And it ends with questioning my very worth The work looks like reaching into deep wells of confidence required to look past what feels like rejection and see something deeper at play that maybe has nothing at all to do with me. It's caring for the inner child well enough to be able to show up at a table of adults. But the lunch table memories, they cut deep. And we often fail to forget moments of rejection we've experienced in our lives, whether that was from close family, intimate friends, or the pain of exclusion from a community that had once welcomed us. Our memories of rejection stubbornly persist and threaten to take over the narrative of our lives. So, the doctor has made his diagnosis. Now, what is the medicine? If you think I'm going to say, duh, it's church, well, you would be right. This work of belonging, the work of belonging is the real spiritual work, and it requires effort on all of our parts. So let's start outward in. I think we come to the congregation sometimes with fantasies about how easy it used to be to make friends, like back when we were in school or when we were younger. But the truth is, we emerge with friendships because we continue to show up to the same place and the same people again and again. It's pretty simple. You simply keep showing up. You keep looking for a smaller interest group to join. You read the weekly e-news, which I noticed is quite long these days, and you find out which volunteer projects are going on, and then you show up to those. Every one of our ministries, from climate action team to homelessness outreach to ending mass incarceration, they are all yearning for you, for new friends to join their efforts. Turning now to social media. If your primary engagement with social media is merely scrolling without meaningfully reaching out, well, then it can result in a deep FOMO, in a deep fear and feeling of missing out, rather than feelings of belonging and connection. So you have to be careful how you use that device. Are you using it to connect or to observe? There is simply no full substitute for person-to-person interaction, which includes phone calls. These interactions do not need to be lengthy to be effective. This is what the Surgeon General has found. Just stopping by somebody's cubicle at work or just swinging by quickly to see a friend in the middle of the day can make a huge difference with them and with you. A little bit of interaction goes a very long way to healing. Dr. Murthy says even interactions with strangers can make a difference in someone's sense of themselves. Now, these interactions may seem unimportant, but they can mean a great deal. Ask how your barista's day is going, and be curious and interested about their response. I see my husband nodding because he's fabulous at this type of interaction. In the modern world, there are more people living alone, and that does not lead to loneliness. Just to be clear, living alone does not lead to loneliness. You can live alone and make a point to build in interaction time in the form of phone calls, dinner dates, or grabbing coffee with someone. You just need to be careful to remember to build it in. Murthy discusses, and Elmo underscores, the importance of checking on and checking in with people. But make no mistake, it is very possible to be lonely within a marriage or partnership. If you suspect your partner or spouse is feeling lonely, then encourage them. Use this service as a conversation starter. Encourage them to talk about their loneliness. Encourage them to make space in their week for connecting with friends and building community, whether that's an evening game night, a weekly volunteer commitment, or joining an adult kickball league or whatever. Talk to your friends about your loneliness if you're experiencing it, because the chances are they have also struggled with loneliness. And when you can both admit it, you can do a lot to resolve it for one another. Having something social on, this is like literally from the Surgeon General, having something social on your calendar benefits you because of the anticipation. It gives you something to look forward to. So even if it's not this week, but next week or the one after, have that on your calendar. Now, I want to make a little sidebar for solitude, which is a state of welcome aloneness. Now, solitude is different than loneliness because it involves feeling connected to ourselves. Solitude is a welcome source of connection. It's when you are meditating or you are writing in a journal, listening to good music, you're crafting or cooking a meal for yourself, or you're reading something relaxing. Solitude is a part of feeling connected and not isolated. And solitude helps us flex our muscles of attentiveness, the quality of our attention. Deepens our relationships and makes our lives meaningful. So this is, again, another issue with the devices, is your attentiveness. The quality of your attention is vital. Our attention has the power to stretch time. It can make an hour feel like 5 minutes. Time flies when you are lost in conversation. So put your devices away when you are talking with a friend or to your partner or when you're having a meal with someone. When someone is truly present with you, it feels incredible. There is nothing else like it. Amen? Find moments to serve each other. Find opportunities to serve each other, recognizing that service is one of the most powerful antidotes to loneliness. When we help others, it reminds us that we have value to bring to the world. Service is such a powerful antidote to loneliness because then we become needed, we become vital, and we become missed when we don't show up. And by the way, you should know that I miss you when you are not here. And even now, I'm looking out and I'm grateful for you, and I'm thinking always about the people who are not there and wondering if you're okay. In his excellent podcast, House Calls, Dr. Murthy talks with psychologist Dr. Marissa Franco about something she calls the acceptance prophecy. Now, I love a prophecy. So the acceptance prophecy is to live with the assumption that people want to be friends with you. If you live with the assumption that people want to be friends with you, when you do that, you actually act warmer toward others. So when you live with this acceptance prophecy, then you will act warmer, and then people will want to hang out with you. So that's the prophecy. And Franco also talks about something called the liking gap. She has studied friendship and relationships. She's a social psychologist. The liking gap. We all underestimate how much strangers like us when we first meet them. I'm going to say that one more time. We all underestimate how much strangers like us when they first meet us. Even if we assume we are unlikable, it turns out that people still like us more than we think. So good news, you are more likable than you may realize. And if you go in expecting a warmer response, well, then you are more likely to get it. And this is some good news. This is some healing news. So 1 in 2 Americans say they are struggling deeply with loneliness. So now is the time to build those social connections in our lives, to care for the quality of our attentiveness, to live with the acceptance prophecy, this assumption that people want to be friends with you. So think about one person who you have not reached out to in a while. Just hold them in your mind. Somebody who you haven't reached out to in a while. You're just wondering how they're doing. Now think about one person in this room who you can greet with your full attention after the service this morning. Now think about one person who you don't see here today, who you could call this afternoon and check up on. See, we can't be leaving it all up to poor little Elmo. It's too much for Elmo. We must all be Elmo now. So, can we make a promise right here, right now, to be the medicine for each other? Can we promise to keep each other connected? To serve one another, to give each other rides on Sunday? To drop in on each other for a quick visit? To keep showing up on Sundays and remember 3 people's names each time? Or try. Can we make a promise to seek out new friends, not only old friends? To join a ministry or a group and dive deeper into that which is longing for you? Okay, there was not as much of a yes there. So can we make a vow, make a promise to join a ministry or a group and dive deeper into that which is longing for you? You are invited to be the medicine for the loneliness epidemic. It's you. You are invited to belong. You are invited to be your true self. You are invited. All you have to do is accept.